Quinn Naylor shoved another log into the crackling fire, his hands numb from the cold despite the threadbare gloves he wore. His 6-year-old daughter, Ava, huddled beneath a faded blanket beside him, her cheeks pink from the December wind. They weren't homeless, just clothes. The old cabin outside town was technically his late uncle's and technically about to collapse. But it had a fireplace, and that was more than most places they could afford. "Dad, is it gonna snow again?" Ava asked, her voice soft and hopeful. He looked out the window. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, thick and low. "Probably," he said, managing a smile. "But we've got cocoa and a fire. That's enough magic for tonight, right?" She nodded, curling deeper into the blanket. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, like someone didn't want to be heard. Quinn frowned. No one ever came out here. He rose, stepping over the worn wooden floorboards, and opened the door. A woman stood on the porch, shivering violently. Her coat was soaked through, hair sticking to her pale face, and her lips were nearly blue. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was here," she said quickly. "My car slid off the road. I've been walking for hours. My phone's dead. I saw the smoke." "Come in," Quinn said without hesitation. "You'll freeze out there." She blinked at him. "Are you sure?" "It's just a fire and a few blankets, but you're welcome to both." She stepped inside without another word. The wind slammed the door behind her. Ava peeked out from her blanket pile and stared. "I'm Quinn. This is my daughter Ava." The woman hesitated, her teeth chattering. Kiara Dalton." "Sit by the fire, Kiera," Quinn said, guiding her toward the hearth. She sank to her knees, holding her trembling hands out toward the flames. Ava leaned close to her dad. "Is she okay?" "She will be," he whispered back. Quinn handed Kiera an old towel and a pair of wool socks from the basket. They were mismatched, but dry. "You'll want to get those shoes off. Your feet must be blocks of ice." Kiera gave him a look like she didn't know what to make of him. "You're being very kind. I must look like a mess." "Messy people don't knock politely," he said. She laughed a little at that. "You saved me from frostbite." He shrugged. "You'd have done the same." She didn't answer. The night settled around them. Quinn made a pot of watery cocoa and gave Kiera the biggest mug. She wrapped both hands around it like it was gold. "This tastes better than anything I've had in weeks," she said. "I doubt that," Quinn said, amused. "You'd be surprised." She didn't say more. Quinn didn't press. He was too used to people keeping their stories close. Later, while Ava dozed off beside the fire, Kiera glanced at Quinn. "You live here?" "For now, work dried up, couldn't keep our apartment. My uncle used to hunt up here. Cabin's been empty since he passed. It's not much, but it keeps us warm." Kiera's face softened. "You're raising her alone." He nodded. "Ava's mom left when she was 3, couldn't handle the whole parent thing. I don't have much, but Ava's my whole world." Silence hung between them. Then Kiera said, "You're a good father." Quinn gave a half smile, brushing a hand through his messy hair. "I'm trying." Kiera stared into the fire. Most people wouldn't have let a stranger in. "You didn't look like a threat." "I could have been." He shrugged. "I've got a good read on people." She glanced at Ava. "She's lucky to have you." Something about the way she said it made Quinn pause. Her voice was low, nearly sad. "Where were you headed?" he asked. "In nowhere." "In nowhere." "I was just driving. I needed to get away." He didn't press. She didn't look like she wanted questions. She looked like someone who'd been running long before her car hit the ditch. That night, he gave Kiera the cot and took the floor. When she protested, he just said, "Ava snores, you'll thank me later." By morning, the snow had blanketed the world in white. Kiera helped him shovel the path while Ava built a lopsided snowman. Kiera's coat was still damp, so Quinn gave her Ava's old extra. It was too small and bright pink, but she wore it anyway. Over the next 2 days, the storm trapped them. Kiera didn't seem in a hurry to leave. She helped cook what little food they had, played cards with Ava, and even fixed the jammed cabin window. She laughed easily, but there was something behind her eyes, something tired. On the 3rd night, while Ava slept again, Kiera sat across from Quinn by the fire. "You ever wish you could start over?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, every day. She nodded slowly. Quinn leaned back. "You're not just some woman who got lost in a snowstorm." Kiera froze. "I don't know who you are, but don't think you're used to being stuck in a tiny cabin with a broke dad and his daughter." She gave a small, guilty smile. "No, I'm not." "Runaway bride." "Worse," she said and laughed. "Runaway CEO." Quinn blinked. "Wait, what?" "My name's Kiera Dalton, as in Dalton Industries." His jaw dropped. "The tech company." She nodded. "My father left it to me. I've been running it for 3 years." "You're a millionaire." She looked embarrassed. "Multi, but it doesn't feel like anything lately. I needed to breathe, so I left. No driver, no security, just me and the road. Then I hit a patch of ice, and here I am." Quinn stared at her. "Why here?" "I don't know. I was driving west. I didn't plan to stop, but then I saw the firelight, and you." He looked at her differently now. "You could buy this whole mountain." "I don't want the mountain," she said. "I just wanted one night where I wasn't being followed or pitched or begged for money." "And instead, you got a broke guy with cocoa and a pink coat." She smiled. "Best thing that's happened to me in months." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You're still welcome here, millionaire or not." "I know." She looked down at her fingers. Then said softly, "It's weird, isn't it? I feel safer here than I ever did in my penthouse." Something shifted in the air between them. "It's not weird," he said. She looked up at him. "I feel it too." Neither of them moved. Then Ava stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about marshmallows. Quinn smiled, but his eyes stayed locked on Kiera. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like running anymore. Kiera awoke before dawn, the pale winter light just beginning to filter through the warped window panes. The fire had burned low, and the cabin was cold again. She sat up slowly on the cot, easing the thin quilt from her shoulders. Ava was curled up near the hearth, still wrapped in her cocoon of blankets, her tiny hand clutching the corner of a stuffed bear that had seen better days. Quinn was already outside. Kiera stepped into the cold with a borrowed scarf wrapped around her neck. She found him behind the cabin, stacking wood beside the shed. His breath fogged in the air, and his movements were slow and deliberate, as though his body had learned to conserve energy the way others might budget money. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked, stepping over a patch of frozen grass. He glanced at her. "Old habit. Mornings used to be when I got the most done." She watched him lift another log, his shoulders straining beneath the thick flannel. "What did you do before all this?" "Construction, mostly roofing, sometimes repairs, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills." He set the log down and straightened. "I was good at it too, had a few steady contracts. But then one company folded, another got bought out, and the rest found cheaper labor." Her brow furrowed. "Didn't you try something else?" "I did. Security guard, delivery driver, warehouse loader, you name it. But none of it lasted. Not with Ava needing me home half the time." She crossed her arms, rubbing warmth into them. "You could have asked your family for help." "I don't have any left. My uncle was the only one who ever stuck around after my mom passed. Everyone else disappeared when things got hard." She nodded, not prying further. He leaned back against the shed wall. What about you? You just walked away from a whole empire. Kiera tilted her head. I didn't walk away. I stepped out. There's a difference. What kind? One implies I'm not going back. He studied her. Are you? She hesitated. I don't know yet. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the crunch of falling snow from the branches above. Kiera reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a silver chain with a small pendant. She held it in her palm. This was my mother's. She wore it every day until she died. I used to think wearing it would make me feel closer to her, especially when I was drowning in boardroom chaos. But lately, it just feels like an anchor. Quinn looked at it, then at her. Maybe it's not the necklace. Maybe it's what it reminds you of. You sound like someone who reads a lot of poetry. I read cereal boxes and overdue electric bills. She laughed, genuinely this time, and he smiled, not the polite kind, but something warmer, deeper. Back inside, Ava was awake and drawing on a spare scrap of paper with a stubby crayon. Quinn knelt beside her, brushing snow from his boots. Kiera sat cross-legged near them. What are you working on? A castle, Ava said proudly. Kiera leaned over to look. It's beautiful. It's where princesses go when they are tired of everyone looking at them. Quinn and Kiera exchanged a glance, both caught off guard. Ava added, they get tired too, you know, even though they wear crowns. Kiera reached out and touched the edge of the drawing. I think I'd like to live there. Ava grinned. You can, but you have to be nice to the dragons. Deal. Later that afternoon, Kiera stood at the edge of the frozen creek behind the cabin, her breath rising in soft plumes. The sky had cleared, and for the first time in days, the sun pierced through the clouds. The light reflected off the snow, throwing sparkles across the banks like diamonds. She didn't hear Quinn approach until he was beside her. I've never seen snow look like that, she said, not turning. It's the sun, makes everything look softer than it is. She bent down, brushing a gloved hand against the ice. I used to think I had to be perfect. Every move, every word, every outfit. My father drilled it into me. He said the world only respected women who didn't make mistakes. Sounds exhausting. It was, still is. He crouched beside her. Why keep doing it? Because I didn't want to disappoint him. Even after he died, I kept hearing his voice every time I hesitated. Quinn didn't speak for a long moment. Then, I used to think I had to be everything for Ava. The mom, the dad, the friend, the teacher. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I was doing enough, if I was enough. You are, Kiera said instantly. He looked at her surprised. You're more than enough. Their eyes met, and something shifted again, something heavier this time, more certain. There wasn't heat between them, there was gravity. That night, the fire crackled louder than usual. The wind had calmed, and the cabin felt oddly still. Ava was asleep early, worn out from building a snow fort behind the shed. Kiera and Quinn sat on opposite sides of the hearth, the firelight throwing flickers across their faces. Kiera traced patterns on the wooden floor with her fingertip. Do you think people can really change? Or do they just learn to hide the parts others don't like? I think people change when they stop trying to be what everyone else expects. She looked up. That's exactly what I've been afraid of, that if I stop performing, I'll disappear. You're not a performance. You don't know me. I know enough. She hesitated, then said, before I left, I was supposed to sign a merger deal. One that would have made Dalton Industries nearly double in size, but it would have cost 500 employees their jobs. Quinn stiffened. Did you sign it? No. Why not? Because I couldn't look in the mirror anymore. I kept telling myself it was just business, that I was protecting the company's future. but really, I was protecting my reputation. He nodded slowly. That's the kind of decision that keeps you up at night. I haven't slept more than 4 hours in months. You slept here. She looked at him. Yeah, I did. She stood suddenly and crossed the room. He rose, uncertain. Thank you, she said, not just for the fire, for not asking me for anything. He stepped toward her. You think I'd take advantage of you because you're rich? No, I think most people would treat me differently. You didn't. I saw you. She tilted her head. What do you mean? I saw you before I knew your name, before the fancy company or the empire. I saw someone cold and scared and stubborn and proud, and I liked her. Her voice was barely a whisper. You still do. He didn't answer, not with words. He kissed her. It wasn't rushed or hungry. It was quiet, steady, like something inevitable. Her hands found his chest, anchoring herself, and his fingers brushed the edge of her jaw, gentle and certain. When they pulled apart, she didn't open her eyes immediately. Then she said, I have to go back. He nodded, I know. But I don't want to forget this. You won't. She reached into her coat pocket and pressed something into his palm. When he looked, it was the silver pendant. You should keep it, he said. No, I want you to have it, so don't forget what it felt like to just be a person. He closed his fingers around it. She stepped back. I'll come back when I can. I'll be here. She looked at him one last time, then turned toward the cot. Tomorrow, the snowplows would reach the road again. Tomorrow, she'd return to a world that expected her to wear armor. But tonight, she was just Kiera. And that was enough. The roads finally opened 3 days after Kiera left. Quinn didn't say much to Ava about it, just that Miss Kiera had to go home, and that home wasn't as close as they wished it was. Ava had nodded, a little too quietly, and gone back to her coloring. The silver pendant stayed in Quinn's pocket, warm from his fingers more often than not. A week passed. Then another. The silence stretched longer than he expected, but Quinn didn't reach out. He had no number, no address, and if he was being honest, no idea if she'd meant it when she said she'd come back. People made promises when the world felt small and safe. They didn't always keep them once they stepped back into their lives. By the 3rd week, Quinn was back at the diner in town, washing dishes and taking shifts whenever someone called in sick. The pay wasn't great, but he could bring Ava a grilled cheese at the end of his shift and maybe take home leftover soup if the manager was in a good mood. The cabin felt emptier now, though it hadn't really changed. Then, on a Thursday evening just before closing, a dark blue SUV pulled up outside the diner. Quinn didn't notice it at first. He was elbowed deep in soap suds and half listening to old country music playing from the radio when the bell over the door chimed. He turned and his breath caught. Kiera stood in the doorway, framed by the last light of the setting sun. Her coat was different longer, lined in fur, but her eyes were the same, and they were locked on him. He pulled off his apron and stepped around the counter, unsure if he should smile or speak or just stand there. She didn't wait. I've been looking for you for 3 days, she said, walking straight to him. He blinked. You, what? I went back to the cabin first. No one was there. Then I found the general store. The guy behind the counter told me you worked here. Quinn nodded slowly. I didn't think you'd actually come back. I almost didn't. He stilled. Not because I didn't want to, she added quickly, but because I was afraid I'd ruin it. He folded his arms. Ruin what? The quiet, the way you looked at me without needing anything. The way Ava made me feel like I belonged without asking who I was. Quinn's voice was rougher than he meant it to be. You don't belong out here, Kiera. She stepped closer. Don't tell me where I belong, not when I've been trying to figure that out for 30 years. He swallowed hard. I signed the merger, she said, voice quieter now, but with conditions. No one lost their jobs. The board wasn't happy, but I reminded them the name on the building is mine. He didn't know what to say to that. I went back because I had to, but I came here because I wanted to. He looked at her, really looked. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her hands were bare. She'd clearly rushed. Her makeup was gone, her hair windblown. She didn't look like a CEO. She looked like a woman who'd made a choice. I don't have anything to offer you, he said. I'm not asking for anything. I sleep in a drafty cabin and stretch soup into 3 meals. I know. I can't give you 5-star restaurants or chauffeurs or any of the things you're used to. That's not what I came for. He hesitated, then what did you come for? She reached out, taking his hand. You. He stared at her for a long moment, his fingers curling slowly around hers. Then, Ava's going to lose her mind. Kiera laughed, and for the first time in weeks, the sound didn't carry an edge of exhaustion. Back at the cabin, Ava greeted Kiera like she'd been gone an hour instead of nearly a month. She tugged her inside, made her sit by the fire, and immediately presented a new drawing of the castle with an extra tower this time, for the dragons' dance parties. Kiera stayed the night. Quinn gave her the cot again, but this time he didn't take the floor. He stayed up with her, long after Ava drifted off, sitting by the fire as the snow began to fall again outside. I don't know what this is yet, Kiera said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I know I don't want to walk away from it. Quinn didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the flames. I've never let anyone in since Ava's mom left. Not really, he said. Couldn't afford to, not with everything riding on me keeping it together. I'm not asking you to fall apart. I'm saying I might if I let this happen. She reached over, took his hand again. Then let it. He glanced at her, eyes shadowed in the firelight. I don't want to be something you run to when you're tired of boardrooms and power suits. You're not. I don't want to be a secret you keep from your world. You won't be. I don't want Ava to get attached if you're not staying. I didn't drive 6 hours through sleet and ice to say goodbye. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. I've been offered a position on a non-profit board, Kiera said then. It's small, local, focuses on rebuilding housing for families who have lost everything. They need someone who understands infrastructure and development. He turned to her. It's based in the next town over. His brow rose. I told the board I'd accept on one condition if I could work remotely most days, because I want to spend time here, with you, with Ava, if you'll let me. Quinn didn't speak, he simply let that settle between them. Kiera looked down. I know it's a lot. No, he said, cutting her off. It's not. She met his eyes. It's more than I ever thought I'd get to have again. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in silence for a while, the quiet of the snowfall wrapping around the cabin like a blanket. In the morning, Ava climbed into Kiera's lap and asked if she could teach her how to wear heels. Kiera laughed and promised to try, though probably not in the snow. Quinn stood at the cabin doorway, watching them, the pendant still warm in his pocket. He didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in years, it felt like something he could believe in. Not because things had magically fixed themselves, but because someone had chosen to stay, not for what he had, but for who he was. The first sign that life was shifting came with the sound of hammering. It echoed through the trees one crisp afternoon, rhythmic and certain. Quinn stood beside the cabin, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a tool belt slung low on his hips. He worked with precision, placing the new window pane with careful hands. Kiera watched from the steps, holding a mug of coffee that had actually come from a proper machine, one she'd brought with her after her 3rd week of staying in town. Not just visiting, staying. She'd rented a modest brick bungalow 10 minutes away, all one level with wide windows and a little garden that hadn't seen love in years. She said she liked the way the place felt like it had a story. Quinn had helped her fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen, and Ava had claimed the old sunroom as her reading cave the moment she saw it. "You missed a spot," Kiera said lightly as Quinn adjusted the frame. He didn't glance over. "You're not allowed to criticize unless you're holding a drill." "I brought you coffee. That gives me at least partial authority." He tested the frame, stepping back. "I'll allow it." She smiled into her mug. "You know, this place is starting to look like someone actually lives here." He turned toward her, brushing sawdust from his hands. "That's the idea." "I meant it as a compliment." "I'll take it as one if you admit you're impressed." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Fine, I'm impressed. You turned this place into something warm. That's not easy." He stepped toward her, eyes searching hers. "Neither is letting yourself be part of someone else's mess, but you did." She hesitated, the humor in her face softening into something more vulnerable. "It's not a mess to me." They stood there in the cold air, the scent of pine and sawdust between them. Then Ava burst from the cabin, bundled in her coat and wildly waving a sheet of paper. "Miss Kiera, you forgot to see the invitation." Kiera knelt as Ava handed her the crayon-colored flyer. At the top, in large, shaky letters, it read, "You are invited to the snowball." Kiera read aloud. "Hosted by Princess Ava of the North Forest Kingdom, featuring hot chocolate, dancing, and cookies." Ava beamed. "It's tonight, you have to wear something fancy." Kiera looked up at Quinn, who suddenly seemed very interested in tapping nails into the window frame. "Did you know about this?" "She's been rehearsing for days. There was a whole speech planned, but apparently she skipped to the flyer." Kiera stood solemn. "Well then, I guess I better go get my tiara." That evening, the snowball unfolded in the cabin, like something out of a fairy tale, told through the eyes of a 6-year-old. Kiera wore a long gray sweater dress she'd never had reason to wear before and a pair of boots that still had tags on them. Ava insisted on fixing her hairdo, which resulted in 3 sparkly clips and a braid that barely held together. Quinn wore a dark button-down shirt and the cleanest jeans he owned. He even shaved. They danced by the fire, music playing from a speaker connected to Kiera's phone. Ava led them through waltzes, twirls, and a version of the macaroni dance that involved actual elbow noodles glued to a crown. Kiera laughed so hard she nearly cried. Later, when Ava had fallen asleep mid-sentence beneath a blanket fort made of couch cushions and old quilts, Quinn handed Kiera a mug of cocoa and walked with her outside. The stars were fierce and bright, scattered across the sky like pieces of ice. "I haven't danced like that since college," she said, leaning against the porch railing. "You were good. You were better." He leaned beside her. "Kept thinking I'd wake up, that you coming back was just something I imagined." "I'm here." "I know, that's what makes it harder to believe." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You think I'll disappear?" "I think people like you don't usually stay in places like this." "I thought that too, until I realized I didn't want to be anywhere else." He watched her carefully. "You're sure about that?" She turned fully to face him. "I went to a charity gala last week in the city. My assistant begged me to show up, so I did. Wore the dress, smiled for the cameras, shook hands with people who only saw me as leverage." She paused, her voice low. And the entire time, I kept thinking about firewood and Ava's snow fort. I didn't belong there. I don't know if I ever did. He exhaled slowly. So what now? She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was a deed. Quinn took it, frowning until he saw the address. It was the cabin. He looked up sharply. What did you do? I bought it. His jaw tightened. I didn't ask you to. You didn't, she interrupted, but the land was going to auction next month. I checked. Someone else would have torn it down and built a vacation rental. I didn't buy it for you. I bought it because it deserves to be protected. You made this place matter. I just made sure it would stay that way. He held the paper, silent. I added your name to the deed. His eyes flickered to hers. I didn't do it out of pity, she said quickly. I did it because it's yours more than anyone's, and because I want to build something here with you, but only if you want that too. He let the paper fall to his side and stepped toward her. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, he said, but I know I want you in it. She nodded, her voice suddenly thick. That's all I want to. He kissed her then, not like the first time, soft and uncertain. This kiss was certain. It was a promise. Weeks passed. The cabin got new windows and insulation. Kiera helped paint the doors a deep blue that Ava insisted looked like ocean magic. They planted vegetables behind the shed, and Quinn taught Kiera how to split logs without bruising her palms. She taught him how to build a website for his new carpentry services. Word spread quickly. By spring, he had more calls than he could handle alone. He hired 2 workers from town, and Kiera handled the books from her sunroom. Ava started school nearby. She made friends fast and invited all of them to a second snowball, even though the snow had long melted. Kiera stayed. Through rain and sun, through late-night dinners and early morning school runs, through disagreements about what color to paint the kitchen and who left the hammer on the porch. She stayed. On a warm afternoon in May, Quinn stood at the edge of the field behind the cabin. A small group of people gathered beneath a white tent. The arch was handmade, covered in wildflowers and pine branches. Kiera walked toward him in a soft champagne dress, her hair curled around her shoulders, no tiara this time. Only a promise in her eyes. Ava stood proudly between them, holding the rings. They said their vows in front of the people who mattered, in the place that had given them a second chance. When the ceremony was over, and the cheers faded into music and laughter, Quinn leaned close and whispered in Kiera's ear. Thank you for knocking on my door. She smiled against his shoulder. Thank you for opening it. And just like that, the man who once had nothing but a fire to offer, and the woman who once had everything but peace built a life neither of them had expected, but both of them had always deserved. Ava's voice echoed down the hill as she raced ahead, her boots kicking up sprays of golden leaves. Come on, Miss Kiera said the surprise is almost ready. Quinn followed at a slower pace, his hand wrapped around a bundle of freshly cut pine branches, the scent clinging to his jacket. The sun had dipped low, casting honey-colored light across the fields behind the cabin. The sky was streaked with soft lavender, and the wind carried the edge of autumn's chill. She's not Miss Kiera anymore, Quinn called out, catching up. Ava paused at the edge of the porch, turning back with a wide grin. I know, but it still feels fun to say. Inside, the cabin had changed again. Not in the way it had when Kiera first painted the doors, or when Quinn finally replaced the warped floorboards in the kitchen. This change was different, subtler, and more lived in. A basket of Ava's books sat in the corner of the room, a pair of Kiera's reading glasses rested on the side table, and the scent of cinnamon drifted from the stove. Kiera stood near the fireplace, lighting the last of the tall white candles she'd arranged in a semicircle. She wore a deep plum sweater and dark jeans cuffed at the ankle, her hair tied up in a loose knot. She looked over her shoulder as they stepped in. "You made it just in time." Quinn set the branches down beside the hearth and crossed to her. "What's all this?" She gestured toward the table, where 3 mismatched chairs had been pulled close and a linen cloth draped unevenly over the top. A small box, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, sat in the center. "We never had an engagement dinner," she said, "or really celebrated anything properly. I wanted tonight to feel like more than just another evening." Ava clambered into her seat and clapped her hands. "It's a secret celebration." Kiera leaned closer to Quinn. "Also, she made a menu. I wasn't allowed to change it." He raised an eyebrow as he sat down. "Should I be worried?" "Only if you hate peanut butter sandwiches and fruit salads shaped like stars." They ate by the flicker of candlelight, Ava proudly announcing each course and insisting everyone take at least 2 bites of everything, even the slightly soggy cucumber slices she'd arranged around the plate, like a flower. After dinner, Ava yawned mid-sentence and blinked rapidly, trying to stay awake. Quinn carried her to her room, tucking her in beneath the blanket she'd chosen at the farmer's market last month. By the time he returned, Kiera had cleared the table and was standing by the box in the center. She didn't speak at first, just waited until he was close enough for her to reach for his hand. "I know we've done everything a little backward," she said quietly. "Meeting in the middle of a snowstorm, falling for each other before we'd even had a real date, getting married with Ava as our flower girl and ring bearer and DJ. It's the only way I'd want it," he said. "I know, me too." She slid the box toward him, "but I wanted to give you something that felt official." He opened it carefully, lifting the lid. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, thick and cream-colored, with hand-lettered script across the top. "Naylor and Dalton Woodworks and Restoration." He looked up stunned. "We've already gotten so many requests through the website," she continued. "Filed the paperwork last week. Everything's under your name, but I wanted you to know I'll be handling the business side. In between school pickups, of course." "You're serious?" "The income from the nonprofit covers what I need. This is for you, for what you've built, what we've built." He stared at the paper, his throat tight. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to, because I believe in what you do, and because I believe in us." He wrapped his arms around her, the box forgotten, and held her close. Later, they sat on the porch wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the stars blink into view. The air smelled like wood smoke and pine, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called into the dark. Kiera rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't knocked that night?" "I try not to," he said, "because every version of that night that doesn't end with you inside this cabin feels wrong." She was quiet for a moment. "I still have the car." He chuckled, "The one that slid into a ditch." "The very same. I had it towed and fixed. I keep it in the garage, but I don't drive it anymore. I think I just wanted the reminder." "Of what?" "That sometimes getting lost is the fastest way to find what you actually need." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad you got lost." "So am I." Over the next few months, life settled into a rhythm that felt impossibly natural. Quinn's business grew, and soon local families were calling not just for repairs, but for full restorations. He hired 2 more workers, both from the neighboring county, and began training a third, a young woman named Elsie who reminded him of a younger version of Kiera. Sharp-eyed, quick-witted, and unwilling to take shortcuts. Kiera continued her work with the nonprofit, helping families navigate rebuilding after disasters. Her days were full, but not overwhelming. She worked from the sunroom most mornings, laptop open, hair tied back, coffee in hand. Sometimes Ava would curl up beside her, finishing her spelling homework or drawing pictures of houses with floating staircases and glittery rooftops. They hosted dinners with neighbors, turned the old shed into a workshop, and planted a small orchard on the far side of the field. Quinn built a swing for Ava that hung from the oldest oak, and Kiera painted the fence in long, smooth strokes while music drifted from the porch. One afternoon in June, as the clouds gathered low and heavy with summer rain, Kiera stood in the kitchen, holding a small envelope. She turned it over in her hands before calling out. "Quinn." He stepped in from the hallway, wiping his hands on a towel. "What's up?" She handed him the envelope. "It came this morning, from the hospital." He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He read it once, then again. "They confirmed it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. "It's real." Her eyes filled. "I didn't want to get my hopes up." He stepped forward, lifting her hand to place it over his heart. "We're going to have a baby." She let out a shaky breath, then laughed through her tears. "Another roommate? Ava's going to start charging rent." Quinn pulled her into his arms, his voice warm against her ear. "We'll figure it all out, like we always do." That night, they told Ava. She blinked at them, wide-eyed, then whispered, "A real baby." Quinn nodded, "A real baby." She threw her arms around Kiera's waist. "Get to be a big sister." "More than that," Kiera said softly, "you'll be the best one." The seasons turned again. The cabin stayed warm, the porch lights glowing late into the evenings as fireflies blinked in the fields. Kiera's belly grew, and Quinn built a cradle from reclaimed cedar, carving tiny stars into the headboard. When the baby came a boy with Kiera's dark hair and Quinn's quiet gaze, they named him Rowan. Ava insisted on being the first to hold him, and when she did, she whispered a promise into his ear. "You're safe here." And he was. They all were. They had built something stronger than luck and deeper than chance. Not a fairy tale. Something better. A real life. Together,